Is Josh Sweat actually the best option for the Bucs at edge rusher? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the show is here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Of course, you can check out everything that Evan is doing over on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com, including his coverage of Ray's spring training that kicked off, was that, did it officially start today or was
pitchers and catchers, baby. They'll be as you're listening to this, they will hit really the field for the first time today, the pitchers and catchers. They kind of did it yesterday, but it was little baby stuff. Now they'll we'll actually see everybody out and about and doing a more of a workout. And then the full team will arrive this weekend, and then full team workouts Monday, and man, we're just right back in it.
All right. Well, yeah, of course, you can get all your race coverage there on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. But, Evan, the Super Bowl didn't go at all like either of us expected. We basically both got all of our predictions wrong, and we completely sucked at picking that game. And the Eagles put an absolute beatdown on the Chiefs. A big reason for that was edge rusher Josh Sweat. Now, I've mentioned Sweat a time or two on the show, but I've mostly focused on potential trades for guys like Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson. We talked about Max Crosby, but Josh Sweat's a dude that's coming off of a 2.5 sack performance in the Super Bowl. He had 8 sacks this past season. He's going to be talked about a lot in the coming weeks, but he only has one season in his career with double-digit sacks. He had 11 back in 2022. So the big question now with all the hype around Josh Sweat is he the best option for the Bucs to address edge rusher this offseason as a free agent signing rather than having to give up picks to land some of these bigger names that we've talked about on quite a few of these shows?
Personally, look, from a fiscally responsible decision, he's a really good option. I think that personally, I am going all in to try to make that Trey Hendrickson trade happen, and I'll pay him off, considering that is the least amount of draft capital to give up in a deal while also still getting a bona fide ace pass rusher who I can sharpie in there as long as he's healthy, double-digit sacks. Now, where he goes, I don't know. But I should be able to go 10 at least. Okay, we got that covered. My one concern is if you have Sweat and Yaya, are you getting sort of a 1B and a 1B on either side of each other, right? And that's the whole point of the Rays is having that purebred option on the outside that you are screwed and you need to double. You need to double that guy or you're toast. Because when you double him and then you want to double Vita, well, that's 4 people locked up. And now you got to go one-on-one with Yaya and one-on-one with Kalijah. And now you're screwed. So that's what I want from a defensive front for the Buccaneers. That's where I think they become Super Bowl contenders. If they get Josh Sweat, would I be someone who's excited about that move and speaking highly about the Bucs or higher than I am right now? Absolutely, no doubt. Big fan. I think that there's a lot to like about Josh Sweat. I think maybe he would relish in a role of being the guy on a team. But as far as where I am today on as we're recording February 11th, like he's not my number one option at this moment. I'm still in the Trey Hendrickson camp and move off of those options you can deal for, and then Josh Sweat might be my favorite free agency option, right? Like I would take Josh Sweat over Khalil Mack and DeMarcus Lawrence. That I would do. As far as I'm prioritizing a guy in free agency and the trades aren't happening, I think number one on my board might be Josh Sweat.
Okay, yeah, and that was kind of my next question is, we know how much Jason Light values these draft picks. We also know that, draft picks they're like a scratch-off ticket. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But Jason Light has been really, really good. He and his scouts, his crew, everybody's been really, really good at nailing a lot of these draft picks. Now, are you going to get someone in the draft at 19 that's going to do what Myles Garrett does? Probably not. I mean, Mike Green, if a miracle happens and he falls in your lap, he might be that dude. Are you going to find, you got Chris Braswell in the second round last year? Can you get Trey Hendrickson for your second rounder this year? Like those are the things that you have to kind of weigh back and forth on top of the money, obviously. But, it's out of character for Jason Light to pull off these kinds of trades, right? He did it with Jason Pierre-Paul, but it's not his MO. So when we're looking at the Bucs,
do you believe in his team or not?
Right.
I mean, that was the Jason Pierre-Paul thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean they were 100%. A team. They were a team that needed some outside help. They were trending in the right direction and made the move. Now, acquiring Jason Pierre-Paul a little bit maybe different than a Trey Hendrickson, who's a complete stud. But having said that, it's just to me, it's go time. Like it. I mean, this. I talked about it. I probably have talked about this ad nauseum for 2 off seasons now, right? I said it entering this past season. They are not Super Bowl contenders because I don't believe in the defensive line as a whole, especially pass rushing. I will continue to bang that drum. And if they don't make it a priority and get someone who has experience making that happen, they're going to be in big time trouble. And they aren't going any further than they have the past couple of years if they don't swing for the fences on a pass rush. Now, as you said, like we'll see where the chips fall. And, let's say you get Josh Sweat and Mike Green falls to you. Well, yeah, give me that. Give me Mike Green. We got Josh Sweat. I can play Mike Green on obvious passing downs and keep everybody fresh. And, away we go. But and you can also develop him as well and start, doing that with you while you already have Braswell in the mix. So, you're kind of now building a pipeline for what your future could be. But, we can get into all that. But, hopefully we should have an answer here in the next month, next 4 weeks, because, free agency's the legal tampering period starts March 10. And that will extremely that will give me clear direction of where I'm heading come the draft.
Well, whether it's free agency, whether it's a trade, there's a whole lot of players that the Bucs need to sign, and they need to do some things to create some cap room before they can start filling all of these needs. We're going to talk about that next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. The best part, Prize Picks is quick and easy. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love their weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even better value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On NFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen on the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It is no secret that I think that Jamel Dean he's going to be off the Bucs roster before the 2025 season. Trading or cutting him frees up about $13 million in cap space. But while we don't know what the actual cap number is going to be as of yet, the Bucs do not have very much in the way of projected cap space right now. They need to re-sign Chris Godwin. They need to re-sign Levante David if he wants to keep playing. They probably want to bring back Ben Bredeson. Anthony Nelson's a free agent. Greg Gaines. You have Bryce Hall and Tavierre Thomas. They're supposed to hit the market. I think they could live without Tavierre Thomas. Maybe they try to bring back Bryce Hall. But, other players, Sterling Shepard, Kyle Trask, JTS, Robert Hainsey. Basically, the Bucs have 25 players that can or will hit free agency. And even if it isn't those guys specifically returning, those are roster spots that you have to fill somehow. So, Evan, when you take a look at the Bucs situation, who are some players that you would consider cap casualty candidates for the Bucs this offseason? And maybe what are some other ways that the Bucs are going to free up some of this money so that they can go trade for Trey Hendrickson like you want them to, or sign Josh Sweat, or sign some of these other free agents that are going to hit the market in a month?
They got a lot of options. Okay. I know it doesn't look pretty right now if you look at some of these sites with their salary cap number, but they got common sense restructuring with Antoine, with Tristan. Think last offseason was a crazy offseason for signing people, right? Well, you can restructure all those contracts now. So you can do all those restructuring and open up a boatload of money. They'll be able to create some space. As I've talked about before, Chris Godwin, bringing him back is actually a cap saving move if you make that happen. So I think that will help, especially considering Godwin and his injury hurt his ceiling for what his deal is likely going to be anyway. And I do not wish that upon Chris. He's the man, and I wish him he can make the most money possible. But in saying with the injury happening, I think that allowed a door to open of the Bucs bringing him back, to which I expect if he put up the Triple Crown, I don't know if that would have happened. So we might be talking about something different. Maybe it's one of those things that something happens for a reason, and he stays with Tampa Bay for his entire career. But otherwise, some of those other guys that you mentioned, like Tavierre and Bryce Hall, you can probably bring them back. They're in the grand scheme of things worth pennies, right? They're really not. I mean, Tavierre is a special teams guy. Bryce is coming off a significant injury. You say, hey, we didn't get anything out of you this past year. Let's try it again as a depth piece. So, if you name some players at me, I'll tell you whether they're here or gone next season. I think, you said Robert Hainsey. I'm going to assume that he's gone because he can probably get a starting gig somewhere else, I think. So
interesting.
He's
one of the ones that I would have thought would be a shoe-in to stay, honestly.
Well, it's not about whether the Bucs would want him to stay. It's the fact that he doesn't have a starting gig. Now, if for some reason they don't sign Bredeson and they think that Hainsey can kick out the guard, maybe, in this draft, they're probably going to have to get another swing offensive lineman. So that might have to happen. Now, again, Jason Light would love Robert Hainsey back, I'm sure. It's just, Graham Barton is the starting center, and if you're not going to play him at guard, well, he can find a starting center job in this league. He can. He might find one with Liam Cohen. So, they need a lot of help there. It would be great to bring in a guy like Hainsey who knows the system and can help the guys around him, right? Makes perfect sense. So him, I think Anthony Nelson right now we're in the middle of. That's going to, without knowing their plans, their grand plans, Nelly might have to be an unfortunate cut, even though I love him and he's not that expensive. But let's say you trade for Hendrickson. Well, that's a lot of money you just poured into the position. So you got him, you got Yaya, you got Braswell. I would assume that if you brought Shaq Barrett back last year, then maybe you're getting him on the cheap this time around. So now that's 4 guys in there. Let's say you draft one, that's a 5th. So, you're running out of spots in the room for him. JTS gone. Greg Gaines gone. You can probably, especially in this draft, it's so deep at defensive tackle. I would be shocked if the Buccaneers did not take a defensive tackle on like day 2. So they are loaded at that position. It's a position of strength in this draft. So to me, you can move on from Gaines, bring in somebody who can play that role. I wouldn't even hate if they kind of got stuck and their first pick with like a Kenneth Grant, right? Just somebody who is probably, I don't know what his ceiling is, but day one, he can go in there and stuff the run and play a little bit of that Logan Hall role. And Gaines got in there as well to give the other guys breathers. So is there anybody else that, another guy who might be a casualty is Jordan Whitehead as well. $4.5 million, not that much, but he didn't produce like we all thought he was going to produce, didn't get the turnovers, and quite frankly, had a really unfortunate incident there that we're really happy that Jordan is okay in the grand scheme of things with that car accident. But, Todd Bowles even said it, you gotta, even when, your family does not so good things, you got to love them, right? That was a very unfortunate thing for the team, entering a must-win game with your secondary in shambles already, and he was out for the season, out for the postseason, and it was completely preventable. So, I don't know. I don't know with him, but I certainly am not sharpieing him in next season. I'm not saying he's out either, but if you told me that Whitehead's gone, I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think that that's a foregone conclusion. Whitehead's back. I think that they have to do some soul searching with that one. I don't know. He didn't really play with Antoine too much, so it's tough to judge. But he didn't do what we thought he was going to do. He wasn't that impactful this past season, and that's just me being brutally honest.
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong, and you bring that up, $4.5 million. Well, you could probably give that to Mike Edwards if he wants to come back. You have Christian Izien, who played phenomenal when he had to go back there, and you have Tyke Smith, who can be your slot corner. So now, or you can leave Christian Izien at slot. You can move Tyke back to safety where he played with Georgia. You have a lot of options there. So
probably will draft the safety again as well.
Yeah. Maybe it shouldn't be too surprising if the Bucs move on from Whitehead again. If they have to free up money, there is a business side to all of this, and there's going to be tough decisions that have to be made. So, all right, well, it's never too early to get Evan's draft takes. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, And when you win, you get paid instantly. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 195, followed by the Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 230, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 850. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs. I'm still battling this cold. I'm not holding that note out for forever. I can't. I physically cannot do it. But we are a ways out from the draft, and while things can change in a hurry based off of free agency, based off trades, that's something that I continuously talk to the insiders about when we're talking about positions of need and players and all that. Everything can change in the blink of an eye. And as you mentioned, we are a month out from this open negotiating window and free agency getting ready to kick off. But, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on the draft as things stand now. And I think the biggest needs on the team, edge rusher, corner, linebacker, in that order.
Defense,
then you can get into the discussion of wide receiver or running back or safety, defensive line, other positions where they might want some more depth. But as things stand now, I think those are the big three in order: edge, corner, linebacker. When you take a look at where the Bucs are in this upcoming draft class, who are maybe the top 3, maybe 4 prospects in your mind that the Bucs should be really high on that would come in as solid fits? And these don't all have to be for number 19. You could be talking about guys that they're going to get on day 2, sleepers that you like in day 3. But who are some guys that you're already aware of that you think would be great fits in Tampa?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much I like a lot of these linebackers, like period. I wouldn't draft any of them in the first round. And I'm off-ball linebackers.
Right.
Jahad Campbell's probably the closest in that world, but there, like, you can go through even like down to Danny Stutzman of Oklahoma. Probably not the coverage guy you want. If I think Chris Paul Jr. I think him and Servassier. If you draft Chris Paul Jr., I think you can say, okay, him or Servassier will be able to hold it down in that coverage linebacker spot. Like, we got 2 athletic dudes who can do the job, and if Servassier gets injured again, we got him, and now we've at least built this depth. I think that, hopefully Levante comes back, but even behind Levante, you might be able to also bring in a linebacker from free agency, considering that those don't typically cost the most. We mentioned Mike Green. I don't know what Jalen Walker. I see stuff where Jalen Walker is super high, or he's down low. I think that if he ever fell to them, I think that he would be someone where you keep the pick. Somebody who I like, James Pierce, the edge rusher out of Tennessee. I think he's a dog. Jahdae Barron, I like him. A guy that has, I think, 8 interceptions in his collegiate career, coming off of 5, played at Texas, and he's gone up against, what I love about him, and maybe all the intangibles aren't quite there as some other high ceiling cornerbacks could be, like maybe, his arm length, so on and so forth. But he went up in competition this year, moving to the SEC, and put forth his best season. He elevated his play. Obviously, he played for a great defense there with the Longhorns, one of the best in the nation. But the fact that every season the past 3 years he's at least gotten an interception, that I need those playmakers on this team, right? That we need to see this team force turnovers. And for the longest time, they just really haven't generated any cornerbacks who have done much of that. It's been a really, it's been a grind. That's why, you look at a guy like from your favorite school, like Xavier Watts. a dude who has a knack for finding the football. I think he's got 13 career interceptions.
He's so good.
and again, he's a guy where his intangibles are not going to jump off the page. He's not going to test well, I'm sure. But when you do that, it's hard to overlook. And this team would need a playmaker who can. Todd Bowles has always had guys who can force fumbles, but really in his tenure, who's been the guy to get the interceptions? It was like Mike Edwards is really the guy. Sean Murphy-Bunting did it a little bit in his tenure here. It certainly wasn't Jamel Dean, despite picking off Justin Herbert. Carlton Davis, we know, it wasn't really him. So, Zion McCollum, hopefully, he wanted, I think, 6 this past year. I think he got like 3 or 4, I forget. He had a couple taken away. 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
He did have a couple overturned.
Yeah, like that Raiders game, he had like 2, and I feel like one of them was at least good. But yeah, so to me, like they got to find somebody who's got a knack for the football. And finally, I've liked him for a while. He's probably a late day 2, maybe early day 3 guy, probably closer to late day 2. Sebastian Castro out of Iowa.
Okay.
He if you pop on the tape, I see like the Antoine in him, just a kind of a bowling ball, like Todd Bowles likes those. You think of Antoine, Christian Izien, even like Rashad Wisdom, who's on the practice squad. Like these guys are bowling ball, 5'8", 5'9", jacked, and they can kind of do a little bit of everything, blitz off the corner. That's what I look at with Sebastian Castro. He just kind of fits that Todd Bowles like safety, that guy, that typical. He's just the prototypical Todd Bowles safety / nickel type of guy. But for Castro, it's more safety. Other guys, like Tyke was more the nickel, and we see what he can do. So Sebastian Castro, that's just been a guy that I've liked his tape, and maybe I'm a little bit higher on him than most, but I also think that that's just a guy that fits what Todd Bowles does. And so that's one of those things where I don't know if other teams would view him the way that I do, but when I look at it through the eyes of what I think Todd Bowles would see, that's just a name that I put out there.
Yeah, what's funny is when you mentioned in the last segment the Bucs potentially moving on from Jordan Whitehead, the first thing that went through my head was, where in the draft could they get Xavier Watts? Because, that was immediately the name that came to mind. And I went ahead and looked it up. 6 interceptions this year, 7 interceptions as a junior last year, but he had 10 pass breakups this season for Notre Dame. And he did have 1 interception return for a touchdown. So,
level of play a little bit different there, but
sure.
But a captain, meets the character. Check. That
there's a lot of Kyle Hamilton in Xavier Watts, and Hamilton's doing just fine in Baltimore.
Yeah, and Hamilton was, at least when he came out of college, it was like a no doubt, prospect. As I said, Xavier Watts, he ain't gonna flash in his testing. It's just not gonna be as sexy. But again, he can ball, and when you keep doing it, I gotta say that it's not luck or an anomaly, right? He's got the goods in some regard, and we can work with it.
And I do have to say that I would have lost a bet if someone had said to me that we were going to go through this whole segment and you were not going to bring up Jack Sawyer, because I thought that was a slam dunk. I thought it was going to be.
It's just tough because I didn't mention many of the edge. There's a lot of edge rushers in this class, so many, but it's the same thing with like linebacker. It's just, like, unless I know really what, I guess I'm kind of doing this ass backwards in a sense, because I don't want to throw out a name and then all of a sudden in free agency they make a move and then I'm like, well, don't worry about that, right? If they get Trey Hendrickson, well, I'm going to start throwing you names of some guys in the back half of the draft who I like at edge, maybe, versus like, unless it's like a Mike Green or something. I just, you're not going to, at least in my opinion, I don't think you should be wasting a day 2, day 3 when you just made that acquisition and you have other holes to fill. Then I'll start saying, over here, you got to, now that you filled this hole, now let's amplify, let's talk about the higher end prospects over here. So with some of these, I'll say this just in a big picture, edge, defensive line in the trenches, running back, really strong draft for those type of positions. I think that you can find a lot of depth. So, as I said, the Bucs don't really need a running back, but I would a 7th round pick or even an undrafted free agent. I think I would just put my hands in the halfback pile, because likely this is Rashad's last season and you're going to have to re-up. And this is a great draft to at least bring in somebody into your system. So, we'll save that for another pod.
All right. Well, Evan, what do we have going on over on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Rays spring training, pitchers and catchers have started. Messi is in town on Friday, so that's a big deal. He'll be at Ray J. And, the Gators are number 3 in the country in basketball. So, at this point, I don't know what the game's going to finish up against Mississippi State. But we're keeping tabs on everything. Obviously, the Bolts are on a break. Four Nations face-off begins today. And we'll see the Lightning in a couple of weeks and throw them back in the fold.
All right. Well, make sure you're checking out everything going on over there on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. Make sure that you're following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eKlosky WTSP. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And of course, make sure that you are following on YouTube with those notifications turned on and wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.